Alright, hello gentlemen. Here we are. Starship 2, and part 2 of the same one. First of all, I'd like to make a couple corrections about the part 1 of this video when I said that there were Lincoln drum brakes on the back of this thing. I've dug my spec sheet out, my book actually, that I wrote back when to remember what I did for this car when I was building it. It was my first attempt at a full-blown quarter-mile car that would never see the street, so I was writing down almost everything all the time. And I've got a fairly good backlog here, or not backlog, but log of what's going on or what was going on at the time. The rear drums were actually off of a 1967 Fairlane, a Ford Fairlane, because it matched the bolt pattern on the differential housing ends, and that was a 390 FE motored Fairlane that I took them off of. They were, number one, smaller diameter than the Lincoln, and secondly, the drums were a lot lighter weight because they didn't have the large cooling fins on them. It was a 10-inch drum. Shoes were 1 3/4. The Lincoln, I believe, had 2-inch shoes, and it was a 12-inch drum. I wouldn't swear to that, but I'm pretty sure it was if I go by memory. And also, as far as the roll cage is concerned, I said that it might have been an 8-point, and it was actually a 12-point. Looking through these pictures as I'm putting them in the computer, I noticed that I had the extra braces in there going through to the engine compartment and the cross braces in the back, which I knew I had them in 2.5, but I forgot that I put them in this car also. So a little bit on the recap on the rear end, which the specs on that were, of course, it's a 9-inch Ford rear end housing, the housing only, uh, which was narrowed. It took 35 spline Mosier axles, a Strange spool. That's the name of the company that makes the spool. It's Strange. And an HRW differential case, the Carrier, which had 3.25 bearings and caps in it. That was the big bearing, the biggest thing you could fit into that damn thing. Also, Richmond gears, 456 gear ratio, and if somebody doesn't know what a spool is, a spool basically locks your rear end up. It has no, the axles slide directly into it. It's one solid chunk. There are no spider gears. There's nothing that will allow it to slip. It's made for that purpose and that purpose only, so that both wheels grab traction at the same rate. Um, there's nothing in there, no clutch pack, no nothing. It's just a chunk of metal that has splines in it and a ring gear mounted on it. That's it. The ladder bars, to answer again for those who didn't read my reply to Kevin Hornbuckle in the other comments section, those were 32-inch ladder bars. They were pro ladder bars made by Chassis Engineering, which came with the brackets for the differential that I'd welded on there. So that's a little recap on the specs on the differential. This was a bulletproof differential. The last thing in the world I was going to have to worry about was the rear end having any type of problems. The end pieces with the bearings in it, I don't remember. I think they were Mosier maybe too. The shop that had narrowed the rear end for me, that did the welding and the end caps, they may have ordered that for me. So I don't have written down here what the hell that was. Let's move on to the pictures that I've got in here. Basically, the car's at the paint shop, and I shaved everything off of this body to lighten it up, of course, and you didn't need the wind drag. Mirrors, taillights, all these things got shaved off, and they got covered, or actually they got the holes plugged up with very, very thin, lightweight sheet metal, tack welded in, and then a very thin coat of Bondo, for two reasons. Number one is that when the car torques and the body twists, that the Bondo doesn't pop out of the damn thing. Number two being weight. Bondo is quite heavy. If you build up enough of it, you get that going. And of course the car is in here in still very raw form. I did the welding, I did all the metal work, I did the framework, things like that, so that after the paint job is done, I wouldn't get welding splatter or any hot metal on the paint job. Putting the engine in, I'd already mocked it up. and the transmission, but I hadn't put them in yet. I hadn't even built them yet, really. When I took it to the body shop, I knew we were going to have to push this thing around, in and out, and I didn't want the car to weigh very much. Steering was easy. That was a stock steering system. It was a non-powered steering box. Gear ratio was perfect for the drag strip. Just tighten the adjustment screw on it to tighten it up a little bit, and it was fine to go. The cowl vents were also closed up. Again, air streaming or streamlining. The car was of utmost importance, and having cowl vents suck in air, causing a drag on the car, was also not preferable. Whatever little bit of weight that little bit of Bondo added to the cowl vent wasn't going to make up for the drag of the wind. The car did go up over 120 mile an hour, so you're talking substantial drag, and we want to take care of that ahead of time. The car got painted, came out really nice, nice red. It was a stock color that the Dodge was originally before it had faded out and gotten old, but my wife is pictured here with the neighbor's daughter, who used to come over all the time and hang out with her. They were kind of buddies. The kid was a good kid. She had a brother, but they did different things over there, so they kept each other company. Anyway, we're putting on the graphics here, the vinyl graphics. She did most of that. We put the stickers on that you get from all the places you buy from. They used to give you a handful of stickers back then. Maybe they still do. I have no clue. But the stickers went on from not only people that I got parts from and so on and so forth, like MSD and Edelbrock and Holly and what have you. These all went on the car, and so did any people that sponsored me, like the sheet metal shop that made the firewalls and the tubs, and that made all these things custom made for me. I made up little vinyl graphics, or had the guy make them up, and put them on the car to sponsor these people, give them a little bit of business. That's the way drag racing goes. They give you a good deal on the stuff, give it to you at cost maybe, and you give them some free advertising. That's the way it happens. There's the car sitting pretty good stance. Of course, it's on an angled driveway, so it looks a little bit more flat. And again, the engine and interior, everything wasn't in the car yet, so it's really not settled in. I think I altered the lower control arms. I've got written down that I extended them 5 inches, but I have no clue what the hell I did there or why. I just have no recollection of it. I think I raised the front end up a little bit, but don't hold me to that. I know I did raise it because the 460 and everything was quite a heavy motor. So there's a motor mocked into it. It's a 75 motor. Of course, not built yet or anything. It's empty. And I just wanted to put it in there. The motor plates that are bolted to the front of the motor right there are not the ones that stayed on it. This is just to hold the front of the motor in place. The motor mounts I did eventually make for it bolted to the stock motor mount bolts on the side of each side of the motor, and were a solid piece all the way to the frame, and then welded to the frame. Same thing with the transmission mount. It was a stock Ford solid mount welded to a cross member, which was then bolted to the frame. It supported everything, so nothing moved. There was no rubber components. There was no room for give. If anything, it was just going to rip metal out, which didn't happen, of course. And of course, this is the 75 motor, which was my real screw up at the time. I didn't know about it. I hadn't read about Mike Hinson's book on the 429, 460 motors. He was the expert at the time, the man to go to, the high priest of the 358 series motor, which was the 429 and a 460 blocks and what have you. Those were the 358 series. He was the man to talk to, and had I read his book or anything that he'd written on it, I would have known that the 1970 and earlier blocks is what you wanted to use due to the high nickel content and thicker castings of the block. I did not know this. It bit me in the ass later on, and we'll get into that. In part 3, we'll go through the motor and the transmission, and I'll teach you some of the mistakes that I've made and on top of some of the smart things that I learned, this whole car was a learning proposition, big time. So, and by the way, yes, that is an Offenhauser Portasonic intake. So anybody that wants to drool a little bit